Welcome back. This is Not Aliens. This is Jared. We have a really great guest today, Wallace Wagner. He was born in a small coal mining town of Logan, West Virginia in 1956. He's received his BS degree from West Virginia University in 81. He did graduate studies at Marshall University and the University of Charleston. He has retired. He's had 20 jobs. He's had a lot of, as far as a broad, I would say, Renaissance man base of life experience. He's a perfect example. And around 1988, he became fascinated with the Bible, history, and prophecy. This interest led him to Egypt, Israel, and Fatima, Portugal. This interest and his own UFO sightings, actual personal experiences in 2016 prompted him to write his book, Crossing the Crevasse. It's available on Amazon. Overall, the book has been well received. He's been on coast to coast. I've been on coast to coast, and this is one of those times where we've talked to Scotty Allen Roberts. We've talked about the different references personally, in the Bible. And as a document of history, it's a fascinating piece of work because it is a collection of different writings, and it has led, I think, each of us as investigators into different realms and interests. And here is someone who has spent many, many years now researching the Bible and UFOs, and it's going to be a great conversation. And you are able to, of course, I'm going to tell him at the end of this interview, we're going to talk again about going to crossingthecrevasse.com, where you can pick up his book again. We're certainly going to bring all that stuff up. It'll be in the notes on YouTube, and of course for the members at Not Aliens. So right now, let's get to it. Wallace, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on.
Thank you, Jared. I'm glad to be here.
This is, it's incredible, the subject matter. It's weird that a lot of it goes back to, I can remember growing up Irish Catholic and my mother saying, oh, there's this book by Eric von Daniken, you might want to read it. And I remember seeing the book cover originally because she had one of the original ones published in the early 60s. And I didn't think much of the cover, to me, it was just another book. And it just didn't occur to me that I was going to end up in a lifelong pursuit personally either, in the idea of that either advanced ancient humans lived on this planet, that we've missed an epoch of human civilization, and this post-flood society that we think is our start in Sumer and all the way to where we are now. And this technology is really just not the beginning. It just doesn't look like that based on what you found even in the Bible, is it?
No.
What got you started in this, really?
Well, I really got interested in prophecy starting around 1988. And I guess I have kind of an uncanny ability to remember what I've read. And going to church all my life, you start hearing things that did not jive with things I had heard previously. And I have eventually come to the conclusion that we only get bits and pieces of the truth from behind the pulpit. So I have done a lot of study and research, as a lot of us have, on my own, and come to some different conclusions. So
I feel like we're both in a generation where, you say it any other politically correct way than that, you're immediately, at least verbally told to be burned at the stake.
Very true. I'm trying to be politically correct.
There are things that I try to talk about with friends and family where, the quote that comes up recently that fascinates me is, within the paradigm, again, your faith should not be tied to a human institution of any kind of religion. Faith is mystical and it's complex, and it has nothing to do with a particular religion. Some people tie their belief system to a particular legalism religion, which is fine, but it's not. I do want to distinguish for people that there is, in my opinion, there's a collective human consciousness. There is something much more complex going on. The planet, ourselves, the universe, we are connected in ways we don't understand yet. Again, I think we touch on it, but at the same time, it's really interesting that people specifically in the Christian faith, they lean heavily on, well, look at C.S. Lewis. We love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and he tried to disprove it, and he became a believer. And it's like, well, okay, but there are things that I'm just going to throw it out there that, again, it's not about disproving one person's religion, but the longest and oldest and most written religion on this planet is Hinduism, are the Vedas. And we as Westerners do not respect or understand or appreciate this religion. And it's fine. It's just that their texts are, I think, historically accurate. We reference the Bible for where places are located. The Hindu Vedas have the same thing, but then they also have a longer history, and they also include what we would call UFOs. They have what appears to be advanced weaponry and machinery, and all of it referencing a time that is clearly likely pre-flood. And we have great researchers out there like Michael Cremo and other people reviewing existing paleoanthropological finds that really do show humans on this planet in timeframes that go beyond 10,000 years. And it's very obvious. And the C.S. Lewis thing I bring up because, and I'll be quiet after this, is that the problem is C.S. Lewis is one example of someone who, irrelevant to having the internet, he didn't explain the two-source theory, or how a council sat down for a state government to create a nationalized religion, which does include what are the sayings of Jesus? What's the, people who are believers don't know what the Yahwehist, the Elohist, the Deuteronomist, they don't understand Q source. They don't know what the saying, they don't actually understand what the complexity is of what they're calling a book is a collection of different, even, I guess, getting to the book of Enoch, it's referenced by Jesus. Enoch is referenced multiple different ways, yet it's the Ethiopian Bible that has the book of Enoch in it, and it's probably the most famous jumping point, isn't it, for deciding if there's UFOs? I guess that's my opening question. Is that the biggest reference for either UFOs or advanced ancient humans in the Bible? Is it the book of Enoch, or is it something else?
It is certainly one of the books. And it's funny you mentioned that book, because I will be putting a copy of the so-called Book of Enoch in my second book that I'm working on now. It will be in the appendix.
Oh, that's awesome.
You really cannot have a true foundational grasp of the Bible, both Old and New Testaments, without having read the Book of Enoch. And it almost made it in the canon. A lot of the church fathers, thought it was legitimate, and it just got voted out, primarily because of a reference to a Messiah, which would make the Jewish population, very uneasy. So it was a trade-off.
Yeah, it's so interesting. They wanted to put it in, yet again, Jesus mentions Enoch references in the Old Testament. So they leave the references into this person, but they take out the book. It seems odd, right?
That is very odd. The same thing has happened with several other books, including the Book of Jasher. There are several mentions of books that are not in the Bible as we have it today.
Right, and then it gets left in. I mean, I have not personally picked up a copy of the Ethiopian Christian canonized copy of the Bible, but apparently that book is still in it. But what about these other books? What, I guess in comparison, people talk about the Book of Enoch so much. Is there oh my gosh, why haven't we talked about this one? What do you think is underreported for alien references in the Bible?
Well, if you no sooner than start Enoch, you realize that there's multitudes of angels, not just the few that we have mentioned in the Bible as we have today. Angels are in charge of virtually everything. And I mean, there's hundreds of them, and they actually have their names. And they, for lack of a better word, fly. They come from the sky and fly over the earth. And you really just need to understand that when you read the word heaven in your Bible, you really need to think of sky. That's what it means, sky. Now,
So, yeah.
another
So just,
example. Yeah, go ahead.
oh no. So just to clarify for people listening, because I'm sure there's plenty of people who are fascinated, but I get feedback sometimes where uh, there's definitely, this is a subject that's sensitive for a lot of people, but in the clarification of research and for what we're talking about, um, we can't cover in the course of this meeting for everyone listening the complexities of the institutions that sat down and said this is going to be in and this isn't. There's a massive interesting for everyone's interest out there to go look at what are the groups, who are the human beings that sat down and said this is in and this isn't, this is in, this is not. The short, I think, dumb answer is, well, it's what the Holy Spirit said. Well, that's not what happened. What happened was men sat down and decided this is a good point and this isn't. This will piss off this group, this one won't. So, but the complexities around that deserves your own interest in research. And in our words, people will pick up different copies of this finished book and they'll say, well, heaven means this and heaven means that. For a long and short answer, I wanted to stop you on the word heaven to give you a chance to explain to people just quickly, why is the word heaven just sky? And to detach this outer worldly meaning of heaven, that the word itself is from documentation that we're calling the Bible, which is really what they were referring to the sky. They were literally meaning the sky, correct?
99.9% of the time, that is correct. But
It's
you
a
have to
reference point.
remember, though, that back in the days when the Bible was written, the Hebrews only had about 7,000 words.
Yeah,
So
so
one word could have several different meanings.
do they mean sky? So they didn't mean heaven as in white robes and a bunch of people sitting on clouds. They meant that direction. They meant the sky.
Up,
Yeah.
look up.
Yeah, they weren't referring to anything else other than these fill in the blank angels, astronauts, cosmonauts, and more advanced people came from that direction. That's what they meant.
Correct.
Yeah. So, sorry, please continue.
No, I was going to say there when I said 99.9, there is a reference in the New Testament that's often overlooked. And Paul mentions that he knew this fellow that went to the third heaven. And different preachers and expositors will give you different answers as to what that means. But you have to know the book of Enoch to know the third heaven is where we go. Heaven, in this other sense, means a physical place, possibly cube shaped, and it has different levels. And for us, we go to the third level, which is commonly called paradise.
So, so that reference again, not that we're turning this into this particular point, but as far as Bible study goes, as far as Revelations, when they say there will be a restored earth, do you think that's literal?
That's a good question, Jared. I'm sure you're going to have many good questions. There is a very good chance that is literal, but
Well,
I could not say it's much more than 80%. There's a
yeah,
20% chance that says maybe it's not literal.
I think that I agree, because post-diluvian mythologies, religions, faiths, everything that has come in the last 6,000 years, whether it's this or the Hindu Vedas and the references for the societies that were here prior. The very foundation of my book is engineered soil. And I know you and I talked about it off air, but when you start with a society that's terraforming the planet in mass, and they're not just doing it with large 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 ton megalithic blocks that they're moving hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, or moving them altitudes. This is a society that clearly had a grasp on a connectivity of sound wave, resonance, energy, their ability to manage things. And I think that these post-diluvian, I think the mythologies that were created pointing back to a time where things were not just peaceful, but the longevity of life, or et cetera, et cetera. I think that why wouldn't the greatest idea of, I think, the echoing remnants of what was once a functioning, tuned, almost instrument, which was this planet, why wouldn't heaven, a restored earth, be the ultimate goal if it wasn't once a very incredible place? It just seems to me that at one point we had it terraformed and groomed. I think we have genetic memories that get brought up in instincts, or like a love of Zen gardening. There's a reason we find an unreasonable orderliness to what we would otherwise say is sand and natural settings. I think there's a very solid underpinning of not just a peace and a meditation to it for some random reason that we like to rake rocks or sand or bonsai a tree. I think there is a buried deep memory of a past time where everything was once together and functioning well. And now we have we've mystified we're so far removed from that, yet there we have these echoing memories. It's like, wow, why is the highest and best use of this planet a restored planet? I mean, if that's it's not go live with little green men with the eggplant platypus somewhere, it's restore the earth.
Well,
Heaven
if you believe in the 1,000-year millennium, that when Christ will come back, either literally for 1,000 years, or the alternative explanation would be for a period of long time, that may be what is referred to as a rejuvenated earth during that time frame.
But it doesn't of the other, yeah, and it doesn't explain the books that are describing space travel, or it's really I've been picked up off the planet, I'm now staring at the earth and the globe of it. I mean, what other references aren't talked about as much that you found that were just kind of mind-bending?
You mean in the Bible?
Yeah.
Well, the most common one that's mind-bending to me would be from John 14, which is commonly used at a funeral. Jesus himself says that he is away. He's not here, he's away, preparing a place for us. And when that place is ready, he will bring us to that place. I think that is overlooked a lot.
That's interesting.
So,
what do you think it means?
Well,
do you think it's metaphorical?
I think when the Bible says there'll be a new heaven and a new earth, that means that we're going to be picked up off this planet and moved to another planet.
So you think this one's beyond repair?
Well, it is written that the days are numbered for this world. That's in 2 Peter. So whether it's beyond repair, I'm not sure it's the right way to describe it. Let's just say we're heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Do you think it's just human actions, or do you think it's that we've damaged the magnetic fields? I mean, is it, you look at the planetary impacts, like this newest one, this 19-mile wide crater that was found in Greenland, and then the very idea that Antarctica and the North Pole, the Arctic areas, were not Arctic at some point, they were tropical. I wonder if it's a natural ebb and flow that, okay, so there's the flash freezing of, we found vegetation and woolly mammoth that appear to be flash frozen. So was there such a planetary impact at one point that caused the poles to shift to a degree that one minute you're grazing in a farm field and the next minute you're frozen below zero? And the question is, okay, is it that the physical geometry of the earth was shifted so far out of whack that there isn't a device or a machinery or any kind of what would look like magical quantum device to shift the planet back into, out of the wobble that we're in, shift the poles back where they should be, or magnetically? I'm wondering if if that's it. Is it just that that there isn't a technology that can be imagined that can even shift the planet back into a tunable, uh, you know,
Well, I'm
parameter?
sure you and your listeners, Jared, certainly know of DARPA, and I can't really get into that a whole lot, but
Not too big.
there's experimentations going on, as you and I know. I would tend to think that it's, the book of Isaiah mentions the earth is going to wobble and to and fro, and there's no mention of it stopping. So from
Yeah.
that standpoint, I would say we've gone beyond being able to go in reverse, that we will continue on the path we're on. And to answer your other point, I do believe that it was physical, perhaps a meteor or a meteorite. When we say instant, that could mean anywhere from, in geological time, 300-400 years. But I believe that the atmosphere was full of debris. And when the meteorite hit, it possibly changed some land masses around and possibly changed the degree that we're tilted here on this planet. And that's possibly why Antarctica is now so cold.
Do you
Honestly
think?
believe, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, go ahead.
I honestly believe that Antarctica was uh, habitated at some point. You can see that on some of the old maps.
Yep.
And somehow, some way, it got pushed to the South Pole, and of course is covered in miles of ice and snow now. But it does contain secrets. I'm fully aware of that and totally believe that.
Well, and that was that was actually my next question was, what do you think? I know there are literalists when it comes to the Bible about, the earth is 6,000 years old or 10,
I sensed you were heading in that direction because you and I both know there have been other, let's just say, incarnations of
yeah.
humans on this planet. So it goes
Yeah.
way back further than 6,000 years.
How do you deconstruct like, what premise are you on that, how do you debunk that? I mean, how do you just,
Well, I interviewed a fellow last night, in fact, and I gave him several choices as to how old he thought the Earth was, and he chose the first one, which was 6,000 years. That seems to be a common thread through the South, especially where I live, because people take their Bible so literally. When it really, in Genesis does not say the earth is 6,000 years. It just gave the 6 days of creation 1,000 years each. So basically, looking from a realist standpoint, okay, it took the Lord 6,000 years to create it. But as far as when that creation was, all we know is it's in the beginning. But the conservative people today kind of rule that out. They just believe it's 6,000 years old, and they fall in line with some of the other people that are out there, like Ken Ham. So I found that kind of unfortunate, but that's what we're up against when it comes to ancient civilizations and ancient astronauts and whatnot, going back further.
Even with so many improvements have been made in the last 60 years with carbon datings, different forms of carbon dating. Optical luminescence has helped tremendously. I mean, and that literally requires you to have a single crystal. It doesn't, I mean, we're talking down to nano-sized particles practically, that you can make some decisions about timing in life. And yes, I do know that when it comes to a creationist theory, Well, you date the layer of earth by the bones you find in it. You date the bones by the layer of earth you find in it. And the general argument about, well, we don't really know how old anything is, that you can make a solid argument about um, that in reference to petrification or mud fossils. There is definitely some science behind it that says, oh, some of this can happen much faster than what people think. However, enough improvements have been made with different dating methods that, like Virginia Steam McIntyre's find in Huatlaco, Mexico, in northern Mexico, where again, this is a modern, anatomically correct human settlement. Uh, Archaeologists brought, and you're familiar with Michael Cremo champion this one, is that, in come these geologists. They know rocks, they know ages, they understand some of the geological processes that would put these layers and where they are. And they identified this site as 275,000 years old. And there were plenty of anthropologists, paleoanthropologists, archaeologists, that the father of South American archaeology was a German scientist from Hamburg, and Max Uli, and he did plenty of dialogues and conversations for people that included kind of a short, crammed history of South America. And it included, well, we know that the Chinese have been to South America and Central America. We know that there is this site that shows Aeolus, Neolus, and it was under Mastodon, and we know it was 30, 40,000 years old. And so that doesn't offend the out of Africa theory or the idea of a Bering Strait land bridge, but the reality is that we're constantly finding sites that don't fit biblical narratives, and that's again, I don't think people should be afraid of that. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, what you say is absolutely true. Unfortunately, a lot of people get their beliefs from behind the pulpit, and that information is not shared from behind the pulpit.
That's a contradiction, even for the histories that they're taught. It's odd that this day and age, you know, you could just go on the internet. It's simple. We're on the internet. It doesn't take much to look it up, and you can't the tap dance of the circular argument of, well, it's misinformation from the devil. Right? You can't. It's that stupid old joke of, the flood's coming, the family's on the roof. You know that joke?
I've heard of that.
You've heard it? Yeah, for everyone who does not know, it's real simple. Family is waiting for God to save them. A car comes along, says there's a flood coming. They don't want to go because God's going to save them. Then comes a boat because the water's rising. They say God's going to save them. Then comes a helicopter. They say God's going to save them. They all die. They get to heaven. They say, God, what went wrong? And God says, I sent a car, a boat, and a helicopter. And I don't know how that simplex example of God-given wisdom and thought, if you're going to go down that line, the very technologies of the constructions of the building that they're preaching from, the microphones, you name it, it's all technologies that are not gray areaed as far as whatever. You can't. People who don't want to expand their minds aren't going to.
You are exactly correct. A lot of people, unfortunately, would prefer to be led. And how dare them go outside the flock and look up something their own.
Right.
So their truth comes from behind the pulpit, and their truth is derived from their, preacher or priest, or perhaps rabbi, and that's all they need to continue on in this life.
In our lifetime, I mean, in the time that I've been around, and I grew up very Catholic, but there's plenty of people who'd be offended by that, and there's plenty of people who, Catholicism is it. This is, the start of this mystical, holy. I mean, the first time I'll tell you, I enjoyed my life growing up Catholic. I felt a lot of comfort in the tradition of it. When I went to people's churches that were Methodist or Baptist, where there was these just plain empty spaces where there was someone who was a minister that wasn't a priest who was married, and it was so foreign and odd. I got to tell you that it made me feel really good to walk back in the ornate, incredible, imperialism of a cathedral or a basilica or an old church. Uh, Sitting in the ways of being Catholic, all those traditions, they do add up on your mindset. And so for me, it was very fascinating in the times where we'd visit friends that were lived in farm countries that were, again, specifically Baptist or Methodist, and it doesn't matter the version. To me, as a Catholic growing up, it was bizarre to watch people sit in these empty buildings with empty walls with nothing going. This is not, even as a child and as a teen growing up, I was like, this is not the Christian faith, as far as I was concerned. I was programmed quite well to expect the ritual and the Holy Roman Church to, that was it. That was Christianity to me. It wasn't, I was young enough, I didn't understand the difference between religion and faith.
The key word you just used is programmed.
Yep.
Wherever you go, you tend to get programmed.
So that is my question to you. Do you feel, though, even being where you are, that kids today are just not buying it?
If I had to answer your question, I would say that there's certainly more questions today than there were in the past. And there's certainly more of a realization today, painting with a wide brush, that there's a lot that we haven't been told or taught. That for me, for example, I am beyond religions. I no longer have a title. What you had mentioned earlier, with some of the Eastern religions, I now find facets of truth in all of them. And, so I am somewhere beyond mainstream Christianity today. And I'm thinking the same thing is happening to the younger generation as well. The information is out there. You just have to have a spark in order to want to look it up for yourself.
Right. And again, for everybody listening, this isn't about disproving the existence of whether you want to call it faith or collective human consciousness that is beyond what we touch today in our physical existence. You can hear me all the time talk about this. I do believe that there is a connectivity that we have never, ever, ever either explained or have total touch on it, or 10 to 15% consciousness. I do believe at some point the human race had a much more connectivity to not only the natural world, but to each other. And it's something that we get echoes and remnants of now. But anyway, I don't think I think it's so important what you said about people need to have that spark of question to go out and find this for themselves. Because if it's strictly based on how they feel, this is going to be a very unproductive conversation for everyone.
Well, I put in my book a phrase that Eisenhower said when he was leaving office, that we needed to be an alert society. And there's a part of me that says, a lot of our society is not alert. They do